And then Caroline. Hey.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first meeting of Cabinet to be held remotely. Welcome you all to this meeting. And I'll start by going to Mr. Hugh Evans for apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have apologies from Councillors Sam Pritchard.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we begin, I'd like to manage expectations from the outset and highlight that there may be some glitches in this meeting as we are using technology to meet for the first time remotely. I'm also conscious that a number of participants may have issues with bandwidth, and I would suggest that if you are getting issues in hearing others, that you turn the video element off so that you can hear the commentary. This meeting, of course, will be recorded and broadcast for the general public. I'll now move to item 2, which is agenda item 2, disclosures of personal and prejudicial interest. I will call each councillor by name. Please, can you state your name and outline if you have any personal or prejudicial interest, please? So firstly, I'll start with myself, Councillor Rob Stewart. I have no interest to declare. I'll next go to Councillor Mark Child. Councillor Child.
Aye, Mark Child, no interest to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Robert Francis Davis.
Robert Francis Davis, no interest to declare.
Thank you. Councillor David Hopkins.
Councillor David Hopkins, no interest to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Andrea Lewis.
Councillor Andrea Lewis, no interest to declare.
Councillor Clive Lloyd.
Chair, Councillor Clive Lloyd, no interest to declare.
Councillor Jennifer Rayner. Councillor Rayner.
Chair, Councillor Jennifer Rayner, no interest to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Stevens.
Councillor Andrew Stevens, no interest to declare.
Councillor Mark Thomas.
Councillor Mark Thomas, no interest to declare.
And then I'll go on to the co-opted members. Councillor Elliot King.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Elliot King, have no interest to declare.
Councillor Alison Pugh.
Councillor Alison Pugh, no interest to declare.
And now on to the officers. Phil Roberts.
Phil Roberts, no interest to declare.
Martin Nichols.
Martin Nichols, no interest to declare.
Tracy Meredith.
Tracy Meredith, no interest to declare.
Ben Smith.
Chair, Ben Smith, no interest to declare.
Hugh Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Hugh Evans, no interest to declare.
Okay, that concludes disclosures of personal and prejudicial interest, and those will be noted if there were any. Agenda item 3, announcements of the Leader of Council. I would like, before we go into the reports in detail, just to place on record my thanks to all of the senior staff, the Chief Executive, the staff in general, and the thousands of volunteers who have been on the front line every day since this crisis began, delivering services to the communities across Swansea. They have made an outstanding contribution, and we are looking for a way in which we can recognise that additional contribution in due course once the crisis is over. But it has been an absolutely wonderful example of how people, both in this council and in our communities, have come together. We've had over 1,400 volunteers come and give their assistance to help protect vulnerable people in our communities, and that is a fantastic achievement. And we've also had close to 1 million hits, sorry, 500,000 hits on our website in the last few weeks alone. So again, you can see the work that the council is continuing to do in these difficult times. So I just wanted to place on record my thanks to the staff and to the officers and to the volunteers. I'd also like to call the Chief Executive in at this point for him to make some comments. Mr. Roberts.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and thanks for the comments about all the staff who've worked. I would also endorse the strong leadership we've had from Cabinet and Council. But my comments, if I may, are going to be a bit more specific about the issue that's on the agenda today. And it would be remiss of me not to pay tribute to the work done by Martin Nichols and his whole team to effectively design, procure and develop a hospital within a month. It's been an astonishing achievement, and Chair, I'm immensely proud of them all. That's all I have to say.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Absolutely concur with that, and I'll come on to say specifically about Mr. Nichols as we come to the report. Our agenda item 4 is public question time. We've not received any questions submitted for that item, but we'll go on to agenda item 5, which is councillors' question time. We have no councillors requesting to join the meeting or submitted questions, so there is nothing for that item. And then we'll go on to agenda item 6, which is the urgent item. This is the rationale for taking an urgent item today at Cabinet. And I'll hand over to the monitoring officer, Tracy Meredith, to go through that item, please.
Thank you, Chair. As monitoring officer, I'm satisfied that this report is put before Cabinet today on an urgency basis pursuant to paragraph 100B 4B of the Local Government Act 1972. The reason for urgency being COVID-19, emergency build of hospital to enable a handover to Swansea Bay University Health Board in the week commencing 27th of April 2020.
Thank you, Ms. Meredith. Are we all happy with the reason for urgency? Thank you. We'll move then on to agenda item 7, which is the pre-decision scrutiny, Financial Procedure Rule 19.1 and FPR 7. This is the authorisation for alteration of conversion of Bay Studios, Fabian Way, Swansea into a 1,000-bed surge hospital on behalf of the Swansea Bay University Health Board. Myself, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Nichols and Mr. Smith joined the scrutiny panel on Friday, where they went through the report that we have before us today to scrutinise the elements and the decision-making of the Council and the Cabinet prior to the decision being made today. I have to say, I know that the chair of the scrutiny committee is unable to join us today, but in her absence, I will give a summary of what they've provided to us by way of a letter. There was overwhelming support at scrutiny for the efforts of the Council, and as Mr. Roberts said earlier, in particular, the way in which Mr. Nichols and the team in Building Services have worked with contractors to create the hospital in a record-breaking time. As of Friday, they had been on site a mere 3 weeks when they were able to confirm that they had created already spaces for up to 500 beds, and were well on target for providing the first phase of the hospital to hand over to the Health Board later this week. Obviously, the second phase is already in progress, and that will be ready for handover in the coming weeks. In terms of feedback, I think there were 2 points that the scrutiny panel wanted us to look at, and that was making sure that the financial burden which is being borne by this council at the present time, which they totally understood and supported, that we were clear that there was a mechanism for recovery of those costs from the Health Board and obviously from the governments. And then the second point was around the future use of that facility once the pandemic peak of the crisis had passed. And again, for those that won't yet have seen the inside of the hospital building, it is not like many of the field hospitals created across the UK. This is a set permanent structure, and one that could be used much longer term by the Health Board or governments should they foresee that use as being an advantage to the Health Board in the area. So those are the 2 items that the scrutiny panel had fed back, or scrutiny programme panel had fed back. Again, I welcome that. I place on on record my thanks for the scrutiny panel looking at the urgent item so quickly. One point I would remake, which I did make at the scrutiny panel on Friday, is that whilst obviously we will want to take every step possible to protect the taxpayer and to recover the costs that we have laid out on this hospital. However, the focus of both Cabinet and senior officers of this council has been on supporting the NHS to save lives. That comes before any financial consideration, and that is why we were minded to move so quickly to authorise the building of this hospital in response to the request passed to us by the Health Board. So again, I just remake that point today, that lives were the most important thing and providing that capacity to the Health Board. With that then, we'll move on to the main agenda item today, which is the report itself, is the report on the building of the Bay Studios Hospital. And I'll call in Mr. Smith first to take us through that report. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair. My technical advice is going to focus particularly on the financial implications set out in section 3. As you've already alluded to, Chair, the focus has been on supporting the NHS for the preservation of life. So section 3.1 sets out that the cost is expected to be up to £15 million. The reason we are doing this is the council is in a more fortunate position than the local health boards are, in that it has sovereign powers to undertake its own borrowing and has its own reserves available to be able to support rapid spend and deployment. It is expected, as set out in section 3.1, that the whole of the costs will ultimately be recovered from the NHS. Section 3.2 sets out the financial rationale for the report. That is both in terms of treating it as an emergency for the preservation of loss of life and anticipated loss of life, and I confirm I exercised my delegated powers in conjunction with the Chief Executive to trigger the FPR 19 emergency provisions. Given the scale of spend, there is a requirement for it to be added by formal resolution of Cabinet to the capital programme. And section 3.2 sets out that the FPR 7 route is via the capital equalisation reserve in the first instance. That is important because that is a fully cash-backed reserve. It is the local financial muscle we have available to deploy rapidly. It is expected that it will be recovered from the Health Board in due course, and so it is a temporary funding.
Okay, I think Mr. Smith is frozen there. We'll give it a second. Okay, while Mr. Smith's connection comes back, can I call Mr. Nichols in to add to the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to give a brief overview. Mr. Smith has covered the key financial aspects. Just pass on my thanks to yourself and the Chief Executive for your kind words in relation to the staff that have been involved in this, and I'll convey those to all involved and the contractors. Just want to draw attention to the main points of the report. I'll come back to the recommendations. First one is to just reinforce that the Health Board have commissioned the Council to undertake the construction of a 1,000-bed surge hospital. The principles of that are set out in the draft collaboration agreement, which is attached at Appendix A, and subject to Cabinet endorsing and approving the report, then the final terms will be agreed between the nominated officers and members within the recommendation and the Health Board directly, and that hopefully should mitigate any of the references in terms of the risks which may be associated with the Health Board actually finally funding the scheme. I should just say that all the conversations that we've had with Health Board officials have been entirely positive, and they fully understand why the Council is taking the lead on this and are grateful for the help and support that we are providing them. Section 2 of the report just outlines a little bit of the history around the site identification process. This is something that's happened across Wales, with health boards and local authorities working in partnership to identify suitable locations. The Swansea Bay University Health Board reviewed all of the locations and potential suitable buildings within its boundaries and identified that there were two preferred locations, one being Bay Studios, which is being delivered on their behalf by Swansea Council, and one by at Llandarcy Academy, which is being delivered directly in conjunction with Neath Talbot. Both those sites were then reviewed and approved by the military assessment team, which have reviewed all surge hospitals to ensure that they are suitable for the intended purpose. Following some site discussions at Bay Studios, works formally commenced on the site on the 3rd of April, or the site setup took place on the 3rd of April. Physical works commenced a few days later. And by and large, they've worked 24/7 since that time through the bank holidays to maximise the opportunity to get the project completed as soon as is possible. The first phase is, as the leader has said, due to be handed over this week. Commissioning works are on and being undertaken. And I just would like to draw attention to 2.6, which outlines very briefly and doesn't do the scale of the project justice, the extent of the works that have been undertaken by all involved in its delivery. The existing building was effectively a shell, so as well as bringing in incoming services, new electrical main systems, new drainage systems, it's effectively the construction of a new building within an existing box, creating a waterproof structure that can accommodate circa 1,000 bed spaces with all the associated mechanical and electrical works. 2.7 highlights that because of the urgency, it was impossible to go through a normal process of procurement, and effectively the range of costs that have been identified are just that, with final costs due to be confirmed on completion of the scheme. The project was commissioned via 2 local contractors, and a separate contract award report is being dealt with under delegation in terms of the appointment of those contractors. We're very grateful for their input. I'd also like just to draw attention that the ability to be able to deliver this project was assisted by the fact that Welsh Government made some amendments to legislation under 2.8, which allowed the scheme to be delivered under permitted development rights, a temporary relaxation of 12 months, allowing buildings across Wales to be used for the purposes of temporary surge hospitals. That required us to ensure we notified the appropriate planning authority, which in this case was Nisbet Talbot, as it is slightly over the border in their boundaries, and that was undertaken by myself at the end of March to ensure that they were notified of the intended use, and they've been very supportive about the principles that we've adopted. Just briefly on further legal implications, the site is owned by Welsh Government and leased to a third party, Mr Roy Thomas, and the University of Wales Trinity St David, who have a presence on the site. A temporary 12-month lease is being agreed, as we understand, between those parties. There is not a requirement for the council to be part of that. The council will be granted a 12-month licence, effectively allowing it to undertake, or up to 12 months licence, effectively allowing it to undertake the works in their building. But the terms of that lease are for the parties involved, not for the council, hence why they aren't included within the report. If I can just therefore summarise by turning Cabinet members' attention to the recommendations. Mr Smith has outlined the need for the scheme to be formally added to the Council's capital programme in line with FPR 7, and I think the FPR 19.1c in terms of the urgency has clearly been set out. The report also asks for delegation to myself and others, including the leader, to be able to finalise the terms, particularly in relation to the collaboration agreement, so that the Council's interests are fully protected, and to recover the full costs of the scheme from the Swansea Bay University Health Board. Thank you, Leader. That's all I have to say.
Rob, you're on mute.
Apologies. Thank you, Mr Nichols. Mr Smith, I know your feed froze. Is there anything you wish to add further to your comments? Mr Smith, if not, okay. Then I'll move on to formally move the report then. Can I begin by formally thanking Mr Nichols and his team for the outstanding work they have done in creating this surge hospital in record-breaking time. I think to underplay the scale of this, really. I mean, it's when you get a chance to visit this site, as many of us have, you appreciate that this is several aircraft-sized buildings spanning 3 or 4 football fields, within which a brand new hospital has been created, and that has been done, as Mr. Nichols said, by teams working round the clock in just under 3 weeks. It's an outstanding effort. The council's building services team, led by Mr. Nichols, have managed the contracts and the contractors, TRJ and Kia, whose teams again have made an outstanding effort to create the hospital. As it's alluded to, this is a Welsh Government site, which is under lead to Mr. Roy Thomas. Again, I'd like to place on record my thanks to both Mr. Thomas and Trinity for their cooperation in allowing the work to move very quickly on this site, and obviously Welsh Government for their support. As I said at scrutiny, I think all of us hope that not a single bed of this facility is needed during this crisis, because we'd all rather the crisis be managed in a way that the surge hospitals are not needed. But unfortunately, given the tragic death rates that we're seeing across the UK, it is likely that at some point in the future, this facility will be needed. But I think all of us can hold our heads up high in that we did the absolute right thing in moving so quickly to support the health service to bring this facility online. Now, the next phase, as Mr. Nichols said, will be for the health board to take charge of the first phase of the hospital, whilst our teams continue with building the second phase. That will mean that equipment and staff then move into that facility, and obviously at the time when it's needed, patients being treated and cared for in that facility. Longer term, as is raised at scrutiny and within their letter, there is a decision for both the health board and for Welsh Government to decide whether this facility could be used on a longer term basis to assist with surgeries and with reduction of waiting lists and for medical treatment on a larger scale. That is a discussion that we are keen to support the health board in having with Welsh Government as soon as possible. So again, a remarkable achievement. I've said publicly this was a wartime effort, and that's absolutely what it was. I'd heard stories of how people came together in wartime, and I think this generation and this group of people have done us proud in what they have created. So my thanks are recorded there. I now move to Councillor Lewis to second, and then I will be calling Cabinet members in for comment. So far, I have Councillor Clive Lloyd, Councillor David Hopkins and Councillor Mark Childs, but if there are others, I will call you in due course. So I move now to Councillor. First of all, before I do, I'll formally move the recommendations on the report, and then I will move to Councillor Lewis to second. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader. It gives me great pleasure to second this report. Not only would I also like to add my thanks to TRJ and Kia for the excellent work that they're doing, working round the clock 24/7, but I would like to pay specific tribute to Nigel Williams and his team and to Martin Nichols, with Building Services as the principal contractor. Not only are they delivering, as you said, at an impressive scale, but they are still achieving extremely high quality, and it's being done, as you said, in record time. What impressed me on the site visit was their thought as well to the welfare facilities for the NHS staff, as well as the comfort of the patients. And I'm sure that this will be an invaluable asset to the NHS going forward. Unlike other surge hospitals, this hospital isn't built in a stadium and could be fit for a longer term purpose, as you've stated. And I think that it will be a really beneficial facility for health. So it gives me great pleasure, as I said, to formally second the report. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Before I call Councillor Lloyd in, I'd like to call the Chief Executive in for a second, if he could share just some of the images so that those viewing this broadcast can get a feel for this. So just quickly, these images here that we're displaying now show the latter phases which are under construction at the present time. And they show the wards that are being created. There's around 100 wards being created in the facility, which will house those 1,000 beds. Obviously, it's not just wards, it's provision for staff to shower, obviously all the toilet facilities, all of the heating and ventilation works and the mechanical and engineering works obviously have all gone in, and again, the suppliers of those have again responded brilliantly to get those in. And as you can see, as the images now progress, the progress that was made just in a few days. I mean, some of these images are taken after some just 8 or 9 days of work, and it shows the true pace and scale and quality of the works that are being created. What we now have is a 1,000-bed semi-permanent hospital on our doorstep, which we hope obviously won't be needed to its full potential in this crisis, but maybe of use longer term. So hope that was helpful. I'll now go to Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Clive Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, very, very briefly, just to echo the comments that have been made. As somebody who's been out to visit the site, what strikes you on approaching the site and the actual hangar construction is that you turn up and you think, blinking heck, you don't want to be going in there if you've got any sort of emergency. But Mr. Nichols is absolutely right. What they've done in the interior in constructing a first-class hospital facility is absolutely mind-blowing. Not only that, but obviously, as people have mentioned, the speed at which this has all been achieved is absolutely remarkable. And I don't think the words that any of us say today, or indeed the photos as it currently has been displayed, give it justice. And I hope that cabinet members have a chance over the next few weeks to visit the site and see what's actually been achieved. Been achieved with speed, it's been achieved with commitment, it's been achieved with professionalism. And I know Mr. Nichols is a very humble officer within the council, but I think it's worth restating that he's not only been leading on achieving this, but at the same time managing the programme of protecting our most vulnerable and shielded residents through the community programme that he's led on and established. So to be able to achieve this one feat would be a career achievement in my light, but to have achieved the two that he's led on in the current circumstances is huge testament to Mr. Nichols personally, and I'd like to put my thanks on record to him for dealing with that and achieving it, as I said, with so much commitment and professionalism. His updates have been superb. There's been absolute clarity on progress at every meeting, and I think that's been crucial to the political leaders of the council in getting to where we have in such a short space of time. So I leave it there, Leader. I think it's been a crucial part of the plan in our reaction to the coronavirus epidemic. Like you, I hope we never get to the stage where we have to use it. But if we do, I'm hugely reassured that we've now got a capacity in place to deal with the issues that may come in the coming weeks and months. But yeah, thanks to everyone involved. Well done, and a huge achievement for Swansea.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lloyd. I'll bring in next Councillor David Hopkins.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to pay tribute not just to Martin Nichols, who's done an absolutely outstanding job, but I'd like to pay tribute to you for the leadership that you have shown throughout this pandemic. It's filled me with pride to actually be part of your team to see what can be done in partnership. Swansea City Council has actually bent over backwards, working with the NHS, working with Kia, working with many people to deliver, as we say, a wartime effort. This could not be achieved without yourself and others. So, Leader, I would personally like to thank you for the leadership you've thrown throughout. It's a bit ironic. Unfortunately, I couldn't make the visit. Last time I did visit this site, it was many years ago when I went there for an interview when it was Ford's. And this site has never seen so much activity since. There is no doubt about it. But also, all I would like to say, this just goes to show that local government do work and it do deliver. So well done for all your efforts. It was really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. I'll bring in now Councillor
Thank you, Leader. I echo everybody's comments, but I wouldn't like to let this opportunity go at our first Cabinet meeting without saying a thank you from me, and I'm sure all of us, to all the domestic and residential care workers, both council and independent sector, for their dedication, compassion and hard work. Sometimes very emotional situations over the past few weeks and in the future few weeks as well. And I will say a really big thank you to them. We built this facility to cope with a feared peak, and I think it's thanks to the public in Swansea, the NHS and the care workers, as I've just mentioned, that we've been able to manage with considerable effort. However, you are right, there is potential and possibility that this will still be needed for COVID-19 work. And as we hopefully meet the First Minister's 7 criteria about how we relax, there is a potential of further peaks in COVID-19 outbreak further down the road. And so this facility may well become, in my view, a facility for the region, even for the whole of South Wales going forward, to deal with the future impact of COVID-19 over the coming months. And possibly after that, when we hopefully beat COVID-19, in the medium term, it may well have future use for the NHS as well. And I hope this process of working has brought us much closer to the NHS and our colleagues in Leith Talbot in building this and responding overall to COVID-19. And I hope that goes forward, and I hope this facility goes forward to meet the demands of the people in future as well. So big thank you to everybody involved in this. And I think we've got an asset for the future here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Childs. Again, yeah, big team effort, and I think rightly proud of the achievements that have been made during this period. Okay, so the report has been formally moved and seconded. The recommendations are there for you to see. I'll now hand over to Mr. Evans to call everybody's names for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. I will now read out your names. If you could just say whether you're for, against or abstain. Councillor Rob Stewart.
For.
Councillor Mark Child.
For.
Councillor Robert Francis Davis. Councillor Francis Davis. I suspect you're on mute.
I did press it. For.
Thank you. Councillor David Hopkins.
For.
Councillor Andrea Lewis.
For.
Councillor Clive Lloyd.
For.
Councillor Jen Rayner.
For.
Councillor Andrew Stevens.
For.
Councillor Mark Thomas.
For.
Chair, that's 9 for, no against and no abstentions. That's a unanimous vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Evans. Can I thank you all for attending the first remote meeting of Cabinet? I think it's the first one in Wales. So well done all, and look forward to seeing you next time. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.